Okay, so we have seen the process of modeling. How do we construct differential equations? And also we talked about the importance of stable equilibrium. I mean, an equilibrium and there is an equilibrium. So you can have three different types of equilibrium: stable, unstable, and neutral. In principle, where the all forces acting on the body they are uh, counterbalancing. They create a self balancing system of forces. And then out of these three, it is the stable equilibrium that we are looking forward to achieve. And there are fundamental principles which govern this, and how we achieve this stable equilibrium configuration is defined by the natural laws. There are few natural laws, and uh, every physical system they have to obey, they have to abide by those natural laws. And one of those natural laws in the case of structural mechanics problems is that every system tries to achieve minimum potential energy configuration, and its analog for a dynamic system is also alternate form of what should I say, conservation of energy. So in case of dynamics, what we talk about as a minimum potential energy as a stable deformation configuration. In case of dynamic phenomena, we are looking at the variation of total energy being zero. So that essentially is a statement of conservation of energy of the system. So conservation of energy is a fundamental rule in this universe. Everything is governed by the principle of conservation of energy, and it is the sum total of kinetic and potential energy, and also the energy loss that happens in every cycle of oscillation, that is constant, and that is used to achieve the equilibrium equation. So what we have discussed in the process of deriving the equilibrium equations through governing differential equation through the statement of equilibrium of all forces acting on differential element. The same set of equations can also be derived by invoking the uh, stationarity criteria. Stationarity, if you recall the potential wells that we had discussed in our earlier lecture, the minimum potential energy configuration or even the maximum potential energy configuration corresponding to unstable equilibrium, you will see that the variation of the potential energy with respect to the deformation tends to become stationary, or rate of change of potential energy with respect to the change in deformation becomes very small as we approach that extreme position, either minima or maxima, right? So that is what we call as the stationarity. These functional potential energy is a functional. uh, we will come to what is a functional. I already mentioned earlier in the passing that potential energy is a function of function, and that is what we refer to as a functional in mathematics literature, mathematics parlance. So the stationarity of a functional is the key indicator, and we can derive, if we can find a suitable functional governing the problem, governing the basic mechanics of the problem, then a governing differential equation can be derived by considering the uh, extremal or the stationarity of this functional, associated functional. So we will discuss that actually the finite element method was originally derived from this root, the minimum potential energy statement, because that's a concept that is very familiar to uh, structural engineers or the mechanics, people dealing with structural solid mechanics, and that was a very very convenient tool to derive the governing system of equations. It was later realized that what we are doing here is essentially an extension of a very old uh, method, classical method of approximate solution of differential equations, that is called method of weighted residuals. So we will discuss method of weighted residuals today, and after we discuss method of weighted residuals in some detail, we will come back to this variational formulation and see the equivalence between the two approaches. And wherever the variational formulations exist, they are they can be shown to lead to exactly same set of equations as you would obtain by one particular formulation of method of weighted residual. Method of weighted residual, of course, is much more general than uh, the variational formulation. So let us start with so first thing is realization that we are seeking an approximate solution u hat. If u is the basic unknown of the problem, then we are seeking uh, approximate solution u hat for the unknown function u in terms of a series of linear combination, I mean a linear combination of basis functions or trial functions. Right? So we already discussed in our discussion for vector algebra and that any function in n-dimensional space can be represented as a linear combination of base vectors, a set of independent base vectors. And if the dimension of the vector spaces approaches infinity, then we approach a continuous space. And then the concept of vector, a base vectors, changes to a continuous function, a set of continuous functions, and those are called basis functions. And all of you are familiar with this function space or expansion approximation of any function with in terms of base functions, although it was not presented to you in that form ever. For example, I am sure all of you are familiar with Fourier series. Is that Fourier series? Do you
Yes, sir.
remember what is
Yes,
Fourier
sir.
series? Do you remember what is Fourier series? Okay, not the
So it is like,
form, but the basic idea.
yes, sir. I mean, if there is a non-polynomial function, but it is a continuous function, then it was an idea given by Fourier that we can represent it as a linear combination of polynomial functions.
Not polynomial functions. Okay, you can call it trigonometric polynomial, but essential idea is the base functions are trigonometric functions, sine and cosines. So the idea is any periodic function with a finite number of discontinuities and finite discontinuities, they can be modeled as an infinite series or representing comprising sine and cosine terms, right? And of different harmonics with fundamental harmonic related to being related to the period of the function that is being approximated. So that is the basic idea, and we are actually looking at similar kind of expansion. So we are looking at any approximation, some approximation using known basis function. See, in Fourier series also the basis functions were known. It was the coefficient of those trigonometric function. What is the multiplier? What is the amplifying factor, scaling factor associated with each term of that trigonometric series, Fourier series? That was dependent on the function being approximated, right? So we are looking at similar kind of approximation. So nothing new. So the approximate solution you had is represented as a linear combination of basis functions with unknown coefficients. And the chosen set of basis functions should be linearly independent, and that is why they will be basis functions, and they should represent a complete family. So I should be able to generate as many terms as required without any issue, and that in theory represents that any function should be able to be we should be able to represent using those basis functions because it will span the complete function space. So we look at this approximation u as a function of x. For the simplicity, we are restricting ourselves to one-dimensional problem at the moment. We will introduce all the concepts using one-dimensional problem, which is easy to work out, easy to visualize, easy to understand. But then the mathematical structure extends very logically to two-dimensional and three-dimensional problems. Only the little matter of detail what to do in case of two and three dimension, how the independent variables interact, etc. But conceptually the process is same. So the unknown function u is approximated as another function u hat, which is an approximation to u, and u hat is given as a linear combination of these basis functions which satisfy homogeneous boundary conditions. So whatever the primary variable, whatever the function approximation, its homogeneous conditions are satisfied, and there is one term here u naught x which is there to take care of if there is any non-homogeneous boundary condition. For example, if displacement is to be specified to be non-zero, for example, in that bar problem which is fixed at one end, now that fixity condition can imply either the deformation at that point is held to be zero, or another condition could be that the deformation there is a constant deformation, some constant value, right? So this term accounts for that non-homogeneous value, and subsequently this term series form that only accounts for homogeneous boundary condition, so that u is equal to 0 wherever it is required to be at the endpoints, whichever endpoint it is required to be 0, right? Or wherever it is prescribed. So u naught is a function which satisfies non-homogeneous form of essential boundary conditions, and g j of x, j ranging from 1 to 3, etc., they represent a family of basis functions which satisfy homogeneous essential boundary conditions. Please bear with me with this uh, kind of jargon, essential boundary condition. We will you will understand these terms, essential boundary condition, and there is another corresponding term which we call as natural boundary condition. We will understand these what do these terms mean in a couple of lectures down the line. Until then, please bear with me. These boundary conditions, this term that we need to define here, it needs to satisfy the essential boundary condition, whatever that might be, right? But it has to satisfy, it has to be chosen in such a way that the essential boundary conditions are satisfied by this term, and Gj are the functions which satisfy the uh, homogeneous form of essential boundary conditions, right? So now the very fact that u hat is an approximate solution, it implies that there is going to be an error of approximation, isn't it? If it was not an approximate solution, then there is no error, and we are looking at exact solution in that case. So the moment we admit the possibility of approximation, in other words, we are also admitting the possibility of errors. Now, what can be the errors in this solution? There are two types of errors that can possibly arise. One is there is an error in satisfying the governing differential equation, which applies over a domain omega, right? So that is called domain residual. Residual is the error, right? So we have domain residual r omega, and Lu plus p is equal to 0. That is the original governing differential equation, and when I substitute u hat in place of u, then this obviously may not be equal to 0 identically, because if it is equal to 0, then actually we have found the solution to differential equation. So if u hat is not a solution, but rather it is an approximation to the exact solution, then obviously this differential equation will not be satisfied identically, and that is what we call as residual, and that residual is in the domain omega, right? So we call that as domain residual r omega, and similarly there can be other there can be other error in satisfying the boundary conditions of the problem, and that we call as boundary residual. Again, mu hat plus r on the boundaries of the problem. So now, what is the quality of a good approximation? Obviously, we are looking for a as good approximation as possible. So, what qualifies for a good approximation? Any ideas? When can we say that approximation is good?
Sir, when the variation from exact result is least.
Yes, so the error should be as small as possible. That is what you mean to say, isn't it? Now,
Yes, sir.
what you are saying, the variation from the exact solution should be minimum. I mean, the problem is we do not have the exact solution. If we had exact solution, then there would not have been any issue at all. There was no need for any approximate solution in that case. So we need to define error in terms of governing differential equation and the boundary conditions. So if you choose substitute approximate solution in place of the unknown unknown of the problem, then there is going to be an error in satisfying differential equation and boundary condition. And one way to impose to say that the approximation is good is to insist on making these errors as small as possible. So the boundary residual should be minimized, the domain residuals should be minimized, right? If we are able to minimize both these errors, then for all practical purposes, we have found a reasonable approximation to the problem at hand, and our approximate solution should be good enough for our for any practical use. So how do we minimize it? How do we make these errors to be small? We need a quantum. I mean, this is a function of x. This varies over the entire domain omega. And similarly, this boundary varies everywhere in the on the boundary. So whatever the boundary might be, in case of one-dimensional problem, there are 2 points. In case of two-dimensional problem, it is the complete periphery. In case of three-dimensional problem, it is the complete surface which encloses a volume. So uh, they are, of course, variables. They themselves, I mean, the errors that we have here, domain residual and boundary residual, they themselves are uh, functions of independent variable. So in order to define whether or in order to quantify that the error is small, we need to convert them into a number, some kind of number. That is only when we can compare whether it is equal to 0 or whether it is small enough. So what we do is there are several ways of doing that. For one thing could be I just take the area under the curves and add all the uh, points error everywhere in the domain and the boundary condition and the boundaries and equate it to 0. So that would be taking care of the problem, right? But that is one particular instance of what we are looking here in the method of weighted residual. What we are trying to say here is weighted sum of error is equal to 0, or weighted sum of error is forced to vanish. So what I said just a little while back, that I add all the errors everywhere in the domain and boundary, that is like saying I assign unit weight to every single point everywhere. Right? I assign uniform weight to all points in the domain and boundaries, and that would be the weighted sum, what you see here as the integral statement. But I retain some flexibility for myself by saying that uh, error may not be uniform over all points of the domain. At some portion, you may have large errors. At some portion, you may have small errors. So that makes it a fit case for not going for uniform weight, that error at every point is weighted uniformly, and we just enforce equally every consider all points as uh, of the same importance. Whereas the error, of course, changes from point to point in the domain, and it makes sense if we are looking for a better approximation. It makes sense to uh, enforce vanishing error more strongly at locations where error is more, right? So where there is a more deviation from the governing differential equation, residuals are larger in the governing differential equations, and that is why we admit this general formulation, that instead of saying that integral over the residual and integral over the boundary, uh, some of these two errors vanishing, we admit the possibility that uh, weighted integral of domain residual plus weighted integral of the boundary residual over the boundary, that should vanish. Right now, obviously, this contains this particular statement, weighted residual. This is what we call as a statement of weighted residuals, and this sentence, this particular statement contains the exact solution in its fold. Exact solution would be indicated by R omega being 0 uniformly, identically all over the domain, and R gamma being 0 identically all over the boundary. So if R omega is equal to 0 and R gamma is equal to 0, then obviously this statement also holds. Integral, if the integrand is 0, the integral is 0. So this will be reducing to 0 is equal to 0. So this statement of weighted residual, what we are looking at, that contains the uh, that contains the solution, exact solution that we have, exact solution of the problem. And in principle, if we this also represents that what we are doing here is making these residuals orthogonal with respect to these arbitrary functions. The weighting functions are entirely arbitrary, that is the analyst's choice. I can choose whatever weighting function I need to choose, I wish to choose. And the idea is, if I choose a large number of function, if I enforce that this weighted residual or vanishing weighted residual statement holds for a wide variety of weighting functions. For example, I choose a series of weighting functions W1, W2, W3, W4, etc. And I enforce that this weighted sum of weighted residual is 0 for all choice of these weighting functions, then essentially what I am trying to do is this residual is being made orthogonal to the different functions, different base functions. So that way I am eliminating the chances of errors, or I am admitting that, enforcing the condition that whatever the solution has in a particular in terms of any particular base function, that has been taken care of, and there is no component in the error which is represented in that direction. So as I said, the true solution U of governing differential equation would satisfy the weighted residual statement for any arbitrary choice of weighting functions. Since the residuals vanish all over the domain and boundaries, and the integral would obviously vanish. And for an approximate solution, we enforce the vanishing condition for a set of weighting functions. So as I discussed, W1, W2 as a Wj times this domain residual integrated over the domain, plus Wj bar times the boundary residual integrated over the boundary. So, and that holds for any arbitrary number of j is equal to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. So Wj and W bar j, they are arbitrary functions, and if I insist on making these residuals vanish with respect to this inner product with these arbitrary functions for a large number of functions, then I am essentially nudging the approximate solution towards the true solution, because there is no component of error in these base functions if I choose basis functions as the uh, weighting functions. So the practical significance of this weighted residual statement can't be overemphasized, because what scares most of the people is the sight of partial differential equations. But the moment I use this particular weighted residual statement, as if magically the partial differential equation, the problem of partial differential equation transforms into the problem of solution of algebraic simultaneous equations, because all that is left, I mean the differential operators would be operating on this function u hat, approximate function u hat, which is a known function of x uh, in terms of undetermined coefficients. So the differential operators would be exhausted. So all that we will be left with is, after this integral statement, would be a linear equation in terms of the unknown coefficients of the approximate solution. And solution of linear simultaneous equation is of course a very simple task, and we can uh, solve it. I mean, all of us know how to solve simultaneous equations, isn't it? How do you solve simultaneous equations, algebraic linear simultaneous equations?
Sir, we can use matrix method.
Substitution method.
Yes. So which matrix method?
Sir, in which coefficient matrix into the ax is equal to b in
Ax is
k
equal
form.
to b. So how do you solve this system of equations?
There are different methods. Means we can use उसको reduce करते हुए नीचे Gauss elimination method
Yes.
और
Gaussian elimination is one choice,
is one of the method.
and that is what is you studied in when you learned simultaneous equations for the first time in your middle school. What you essentially do, how did you solve a simultaneous equation in your school when you did not know about Gaussian elimination or matrix methods?
So
So
normally
use
solving the
substitution
solution
method.
equations intersecting point.
You actually eliminate the variables gradually, sequentially. Take one variable,
Yes, sir.
eliminate it from rest of the equations, then take the next equation, eliminate that variable from rest of the equations, and so on until you end up with one equation in one unknown, isn't it? And then you solve it, and then you again work your way backwards. That is essentially Gaussian elimination is. Right? What you do in Gaussian elimination is essentially sequential elimination of variables from the equations. And it's just that it is organized in a sequence of matrix operation. That's all. But there is nothing special about Gaussian elimination. It is something that all of you have known before coming across these matrix methods. So it's a simple elimination of variables, successive elimination of variables from the equations until you reach a situation where you have one equation in one unknown which can be solved as a trivial ratio of two numbers, right? So the whole idea that I'm trying to emphasize here, that the approximate solution, the method of weighted residual, would reduce. The whole idea here is we try to reduce the partial differential equation into a set of algebraic simultaneous equations. And once we have algebraic simultaneous equations, the process is very straightforward. All of us know how to solve algebraic simultaneous equations. So no matter what the partial differential equation is, where it is coming from, as long as I know the structure and I know what are the basic rules of construction of approximate solution for that, I can develop a good approximation, and the approximation will improve as I include more and more number of terms. I mean, similar to what you might have experienced in Fourier series approximation. As you keep on adding more and more terms in Fourier series, the approximation to the basic original function keeps on improving. And that is what we are trying to do here. We will try to do here. So we construct approximation in terms of known functions and substitute in this weighted residual statement. And once we evaluate this integral for different choice of weight functions, I mean weighting functions are arbitrary, I can choose anything, and as long as they are independent, I can choose anything. So and by doing that, I can generate as many equations as I need. So if I have a three-term approximation, then I'm looking at three unknown coefficient. Then I need three equations to solve for three unknowns. So I just use three sets of weighting functions, generate three equations, and that is enough for me to solve for three unknowns. And once I solve for those three unknown coefficient, plug it back in the original approximation, and we have the approximate solution for the problem. Simple enough, isn't it? So, any questions regarding what we are discussing so far? What we have discussed so far? Okay, so now we go to the next step, next logical step. We have been discussing about the philosophical issues here of method of weighted residual, how it will converge to the true solution, or true solution is contained in this weighted residual statement. So it is not all uh, 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 a pile of just storytelling. So let us now look at the choices. What are the choices that we have for weighting function? How do we choose weighting function? The first one is, of course, the point collocation method, in which we just say that uh, weighting function is a Dirac delta function, or Dirac delta function is a generalized function which is equal to infinity when evaluated at the argument x minus xj. So if x is equal to, at x is equal to xj, this function is infinity and it is zero otherwise. So the effectively, and with the rider, that if that point where this Dirac delta function is defined happens to be in between some interval, then the integrand is, the result of that is, integrand is evaluated at the point of argument of Dirac delta function. So f of x multiplied by Dirac delta function x minus b integrated over the range a to c, where b lies in between a to c, then this function has the result that it is just the function evaluated at x is equal to b, right? So that is what the point collocation method is. All that it says, that if I specify a few discrete points, that error needs to be uh, zero, needs to be enforced to vanish at these discrete set of points x1, x2, x3, etc., at a few number of points in the domain, then that is called point collocation. I just sample the domain residual at those points. So R omega evaluated at x1 is equal to 0. That gives me one equation. R omega evaluated at x is equal to x2 is equal to 0. That is another equation that I get from the weighted residual statement, and so on. So that is one method of choice of weighting functions, where the weighting function is a Dirac delta function. Or I can choose subdomain collocation. So instead of emphasizing, or instead of insisting on error vanishing at discrete set of points, I can also insist that average error over some part of the domain should vanish, some non-overlapping parts of the domain. So let's say omega, the total domain, problem domain, let's say for example, in the bar problem that we have, omega ranges from 0 to L. So I can divide it into two parts, 0 to L by 2 and L by 2 to L. So I integrate, I take the average error in first part, that is 0 to L by 2, make it equal to 0, force it equal to 0. So average error over one half of the domain is equal to 0, and average error over the other half of the domain is equal to 0, right? So, I mean, two parts is just an example. I can divide the entire domain is as many parts as required, depending on how many equations need to be generated, right? And that will depend on how many unknown coefficients are there in the series approximation. And I need to, that gives me the uh, condition, that gives me the input for how many equations uh, are required for solution of those unknown coefficients. And that defines the number of subdomains that I need to generate. Third one is the Galerkin method. Galerkin method consists in choosing the trial functions. Remember those Gj, the series approximation, the basis functions. So we choose trial functions as the weighting functions. So very simple. Once we have done some exercise in choosing those trial functions, then it makes sense to use those functions as the weighting functions, and since they are infinite functions, they cover the infinite dimensional space, then what I am emphasizing, what I am imposing here is I'm making the residual or error orthogonal to the basis function. So the error, there is no component of error in the directions of the approximation that is being represented by these base functions. So let us study this problem, this choice of this weighted residual method of approximate solution by considering a simple example. Again, the second order differential equation, we are ignoring the time dimension here, so it is similar to what we had, exactly identical to what we had in the uh, original bar problem, that d over dx operating on k times d phi over dx plus q is equal to 0. So phi is the unknown of the problem, and the domain is omega is ranging from 0 to 1, and the boundary conditions that are specified are phi at x is equal to 0 is equal to 0, and phi at x is equal to 1 is again equal to 0. So the boundary condition here is specified in terms of phi, right? So here it kind of deviates from the problem that we had discussed earlier in the case of truss problem. The other end, at x is equal to L, the boundary condition was in terms of the derivative of phi, du by dx, because that was the boundary condition specified on the axial thrust. So nevertheless, so let's look at this problem, and the parameters of the problem are k is equal to 1 and q varies over the domain. Q is equal to 1 for first half of the domain, 0 to between 0 to zero point 0.5, and Q is equal to 0 between in the second half of the domain, between 0 to zero point 0.5 to 1. So phi needs to be 0 at x is equal to 0 and x is equal to 1. So what are the possibilities? So these are homogeneous boundary conditions, so we do not need that u naught term, uh, which will take care of non-homogeneous boundary condition. So we consider a two-term approximation. Phi x is phi of x is approximated as phi hat as c1 sine pi x plus c2 sine 2 pi x. As you can see, these sine pi x and sine 2 pi x, they satisfy the specified boundary conditions. Sine of 0 is equal to 0 and sine of pi is equal to 0. Similarly, sine of 0 is equal to 0 and sine of 2 pi is also 0. So when we it satisfies the boundary condition, so there are no boundary residuals, so to say. So the only error that we have here is the domain residual. So the domain residual is obtained by substituting this assumed approximate solution in the governing differential equation. And when we do that, this is what it leads to. K is of course constant, so this differential operator operates on this, so it becomes double derivative of C1 sine pi x plus C2 sine 2 pi x plus Q. That's the residual. Now, if I take the cognizance of Q being defined in two halves, 0 to zero point 0.5 and zero point 0.5 to 1, then I can divide this residual into two parts. So this is after operating this differential on these base functions, I get these terms. So first equation r omega is defined by this term over first half of the problem and first half of the domain, and r omega is equal to this over second half of the domain. Now that's the residual, domain residual, and if I multiply it with the weighting function and equate it to 0, then I have the problem. That's the statement of weighted residual. Wj r omega integrated over the domain is equal to 0. And domain, of course, this residual is defined in two parts. So 0 to 0.5 and 0.5 to 1. So these are the two. I split this integral into sum of two integrals over non-overlapping domains. And two equations can be generated to solve for the two unknowns of the problem by using Galerkin approach, where I choose the differential, I choose the weighting function as W1 for the first instance, and W2 as sine 2 pi x in the second instance. So I first evaluate this integral statement for the choice of W1 as sine pi x, evaluate the integral. Then I will be left with one equation in terms of C1 and C2 as one algebraic equation. Then I choose W2 as equal to sine 2 pi x, again evaluate this integral statement, and that will lead to another set of equations in terms of C1 and C2. And once I solve those system of equations in terms of C1 and C2, I'll find that the coefficients can be evaluated as C1 as 2 over pi cube and C2 as 1 over 2 pi cube. And substituting C1 and C2 in this original approximate form that we had chosen, C1 sine pi x plus C2 sine 2 pi x. So this is the desired approximate solution. So how does this approximate solution look like? So this is the
Hello,
approximate
sir.
solution.
Hello.
Yep.
Sir, can you please explain that part again where that gamma part has no error you explained?
Oh, yes, sure. See, what is the boundary condition of the problem? Boundary condition is phi is equal to 0 at x is equal to 0 and phi is equal to 0 at x is equal to 1. Right? And
Yes, sir.
my approximation here is C1 sine pi x plus C2 sine 2 pi x. Right? Now, both of these functions, phi hat vanishes at x is equal to 0 and x is equal to 1.
Yes, sir.
Irrespective of what is C1 and C2. Right? Phi hat will vanish, will be equal to 0 at x is equal to 0 and phi hat will be equal to 0 at x is equal to 1. So this approximation actually satisfies the boundary conditions exactly. This approximation has no error whatsoever in the satisfying approximation of the boundary condition. So there is no error in boundary conditions. Boundary conditions are exactly satisfied by this approximation, and therefore R gamma, the boundary residual, is 0.
So, sir, then this equation, this approximation C1 sine pi x plus C2 sine 2 pi x, that we have to choose based on our boundary conditions.
Oh yes, that's what I said. I mean, if you go back to the slide deck, you will find that I mentioned the condition for a choice of basis function is that these basis functions have to satisfy the homogeneous form of essential boundary conditions. So these functions are always chosen based on the boundary conditions, essential boundary conditions. Please bear with me for some time to know what is essential boundary conditions. Right? So in this
Okay, sir.
particular case, these are the essential boundary conditions, and these are all homogeneous essential boundary conditions. And these base functions that we have chosen, trial functions, they satisfy these boundary conditions, and therefore there is no residual on the boundary. So R gamma is 0. So our weighted residual statement simplifies to just a weighted sum of domain residual, right? And when I choose this weighting function as these trial functions that we have chosen, and after I evaluate these integrals, you can substitute w1 as a sine pi x and then evaluate these integrals equated to 0. You will get one equation in C1 and C2 because the terms involving sine pi x and sine 2 pi x, they will all be they can all be integrated with respect to x, and the limits imposed and terms evaluated. So eventually you will end up with uh, the C1 and C2 will be the only unknowns left. And similarly, when you choose W2 as sine 2 pi x, you can get another set of equations. And you have two equations in two unknowns, C1 and C2. And C1 and C2 can be solved for as C1 as 2 over pi cube and C2 as 1 over 2 pi cube. And when you substitute that, you get the desired approximation. And the two-term approximation that we have calculated looks like this. And if you are interested in knowing what is the error of approximation, so do r omega, so domain residual varies like this, and this is the point of discontinuity where we had discontinuity of the q, the applied flux. So as you can see that it almost agrees in the least square sense. The error is uh, is, uh, minimized in the least square sense, if you may, and we can work with this solution, and this solution will keep on improving as we add more and more number of terms in the approximation, right? So any questions?
Sir, I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So how can we possibly know that the function we are going to choose is C1 sine pi x plus C2 sine 2 pi x? Even if we chose C1 sine pi x only, it would have satisfied our boundary condition.
Yes, it would have satisfied the boundary condition, but uh, see, how do you choose the Fourier series? What when you look at Fourier series, what do you observe? The lower order terms, they capture the trend. Higher order terms, they capture the details, right? And as you see here, the trend is fine. So sine pi x will give you this trend. Sine pi x is just going to be this, right? But when the second term, that is actually trying to modify the solution in this half, that is taking care of the fact that q is not uniform. So that is how if you add more and more number of terms, your error is going to get more and more reduced. So you will have better and better approximation, I mean the closer to zero line.
Okay, sir.
So error will keep on oscillating about zero line, but this deviation from zero, as you see here, very large deviation from zero, that extent of deviation will be reduced, right? Okay, so I'll stop here, and we'll meet on Tuesday.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.